We're inside the tomb, aren't we? We're with Jesus as life returns to his body. 2 angels are guarding him, while a third is stepping forward to open the door of the tomb. The stone has been rolled away, and we're able to glimpse just a little bit of the outside world, and it looks very dark and very chilly, because it's waiting for Christ's light. For without the light of Christ, there is no warmth and there is no light. Wow, what a picture! What a picture, and an unusual one. Because artists, if you look at the pictures of the resurrection, artists almost always present the risen Christ outside the tomb, not inside. So most resurrection pictures invite us to look into the tomb or to watch Christ as he comes out of the tomb. But what Blake has done in this picture, among other things, is to remind us that resurrection is not about us. Resurrection does not begin with us. The resurrection begins with God, and it is an action of God. So our first task as Christian people, as resurrection people, is therefore to trust and to open ourselves to God. For that is where resurrection is found and where it will happen. We have to open ourselves to the mystery which is the love of God. For resurrection, as Blake says, begins with the action and inspiration of God. The second picture which will appear on the screen there is by the contemporary Scottish artist David Mark. It was produced just 3 years ago, in 2011. And it is called simply Resurrection. You might look at that too for a moment and see what you see in that picture. It's a very modern image, isn't it? It is set in the Middle East, and it speaks of resurrection hope among poverty and among the rubbish and the ecological waste which lie just below the surface of our modern glitz and show. And there's those 2 gigantic bloody feet which form half of the screen. And behind it on the left you can see there's a little caravan, a little troop of people who are probably tourists. People sat on a camel if you look very, very closely, wandering around the famous sites of the Middle East. Wow. This piece of art asks important questions of us and of our world. Are we looking for God in the right places, or are we just like tourists? Do we see that true resurrection hope for us and for our world begins by facing and bearing the wounds and waste of our world? That's why those wounds are very bright, aren't they? The red there. The wounds to remind us that God's hope and light comes out of our woundedness and our hurt, not part of the glitz and the show, but God is present there in the cross and the wounds. So are we simply tourists in our lives, or do we want to be deeper, truer people? That's what David Mark is saying to us, the artist. One of the other things I love about this picture is, and the children picked that up when we looked at the stories, the other pictures around the place, is that you see the feet of Jesus, and you'll see that they're standing where Jesus is standing. Grass and flowers are beginning to grow, because he's transforming, as it were, wherever God's love is present, new life will come, the garden will happen. That's one of the reasons I think the garden is so important. You know, the Garden of Eden, the beginning of the Bible, we have here in the resurrection the garden of new life. So Mary is met in the garden, the picture up there. We have the garden the children created last week, and we have here new flowers and new life growing. For where the risen Christ stands and moves, there a new creation begins. In Christ, new life comes out of the waste places of our light and world. So our second task as Christians, once we've looked to God and trusted in God, in his inspiration, as resurrection people, our task is to stand with Christ and walk with God, even in the midst of poverty and all the wounds of our life. We have to be open in our own hearts to the mystery which is the love of God. Because religion, resurrection, as Blake says, begins with the inspiration and action of God, but it grows out of our relationship, our intimacy with Him. The third picture which will come up there, is by the Czech artist Joseph Zaczek. It was produced in 1988, just before, as you remember, the fall of the Berlin Wall and communism collapsed. It's a part of what people call in the artist's work his period of light, when also, as I say, the Velvet Revolution was beginning to gather speed amongst intellectuals and others in the former communist Czechoslovakia. So change is beginning to grow, as it were, in the tomb of that dark place. So what do you see in that picture, I wonder? Have a look at it for a moment. One of the first things I notice in this picture is that the light, in a way, has no source other than itself. It's not like these electric lights or these candles which we switch on. This is a light that comes from beyond, that we can't control. It's not like natural light. It has a kind of otherworldly, thin, film-like appearance. But this light also easily and naturally integrates itself with its surroundings and brings new things into being. The light radiates into the darkness like a beacon of hope and illumination. Wow, what a wonderful modern portrayal that is of the ancient teaching of our church, the ancient teaching of our Christian theologians, that what we have in the resurrection is the uncreated light of God bringing new life into being, the light of Christ, not a light we can manufacture, but a light which comes from God in God's Son. In that picture you can also see central to a rectangle of light is surrounded each side by as it were a cross. So at the heart of this picture of light is framed by the cross, which reminds us of the mystery and the unity of the cross and resurrection. That beautiful abstract piece of art over there is similar. It's saying the same thing, that cross and resurrection are united. We don't just leave the cross behind when we come to resurrection, but the light of Christ shines through the darkness, through our wounds. He doesn't forget them, but it transforms them. And through the framing of the cross in that picture there, we have a door created. And that's really important. On one level, this reminds us of the empty tomb of Jesus, but on another level, it's calling us, inviting us through that door into risen life with Christ. Because our third task as Christians, as resurrection people, is to recognize this light of Christ and step out into it. To trust in God, to recognize the inspiration and action of God, to know God's presence with us in our hearts, that intimacy, even in our depth of our sadness and our sorrow and our sin, and then to step out into the light which will lead us on. We have to be open in every moment of our lives to this mystery that is the love of God, because resurrection begins with the inspiration of God. It grows out of intimacy with God, and it's manifested in taking up this invitation of God. So, how do we see the resurrection this morning? What word, or set of words, might you write down and add to the display at the back of our building? What picture might you draw? Most importantly, what is it about the resurrection and its story that you want to share with others? And that's what happens in our gospel story today. They're puzzled and they're full of fear, then they start to grasp the joy, and then they want to share it with others. So what is this joy we want to share with others? Recognize it and share it with others. Let God speak to you in the days to come. Pray about it, read the gospel accounts and reflect on them. Let God speak to you through the scriptures, through the art and the words of others, and through what stirs in your own hearts. Trust in the inspiration of God. Know that God seeks to draw new life in the deathly places of your lives. Grow in the intimacy of God. Allow God to cultivate a garden in the waste places of our own hearts and work. And take up the invitation of God. Step out into this amazing, uncreated light which breaks out of every tomb, transforms every darkness, and reigns eternal over every death. In the name of the light of lights, the resurrected one, the one in whom we find our true inspiration our deepest intimacy, and our most loving invitation. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.